database is just like our Excel spreadsheet, right? So it's just like our Excel spreadsheets, but then they are not being called a spreadsheet. What they are called are tables. The way we store our information there is the format for storing information there is similar to the format of our spreadsheet, right? So when we store this information, we store them in a tabular format. It's called tables in SQL, rows and columns. So a feature of a relational database is that these tables in our database have something called a predefined relation. So these tables have a relation that makes it easy to understand how our different tables relate together. So our RDBMS is a software, right? So it's a software we use to store, we use to manage, we use to query and retrieve data in a relational database, right? So our RDBMS is a software. And then we have different RDBMS providers. We have Microsoft, we have Postgres, we have MySQL, right? So, but the one we are going to be making use of for this course is Microsoft SQL Server. So I want us to have it at the back of our mind that RDBMS is a software, right, for storing data in a tabular format, right? So to work with that software, we use a particular programming language. We use a particular query language called SQL. So SQL stands for query language, right? So SQL is a programming language used for managing and manipulating relational database. So we said a relational database is a software used for storing data. So to interact with that software, to communicate with that software, we use a particular programming language called SQL. And SQL stands for structured query language. So with SQL, we can interact with our database. We can do tasks such as creating our database, modifying the database, and retrieving data stored in our database, right? So now, what are the benefits and applications of SQL? So one of the first feature or one of the first benefits of SQL is data management. We can easily manage our data with SQL, right? If we have hundreds of thousands or million rows of data, it doesn't matter to our database because it was created for that purpose to handle large amounts of database structures, and with SQL, we can easily store our data, retrieve and organize our data. So we use SQL to also query our database. We use it to retrieve a specific information. We use it to retrieve one or more specific information. We use it to filter our data. We use it to sort our data. We use it to aggregate our data, and we use it to join our data, which makes it a valuable tool for data analysis. So SQL is also used in the field of data analysis, right? Because as data analysts, you work with data, right? And now DBMS is the software created for working with that data. So with SQL, you can query through large volumes of data. In Excel now, once your data starts getting to maybe about 300,000 rows or thereabouts, it starts to slow, it starts to hang, it starts saying, oh, Microsoft Excel is not responding. You can't experience any of that with a relational database, right? Because a relational database was created solely for that purpose. A relational database can handle millions of rows of data, and you can use your SQL to query through these large volumes of data, and there won't be a single hiccup, right? So now, something we need to understand in SQL are our data types, right? So I want us to have it at the back of our mind that SQL is a programming language, which means it is a language on its own, right? And SQL is a programming language for data. So one of the first things we need to understand is how data is stored in SQL, right? So whenever we want to store our data, they are basically divided into three different types, right? Whenever I want to store data in a relational database, they are basically divided into three data types, and the first is our numeric data type. So our numeric data type is used for storing anything numbers, right? And when you want to store them using SQL, we use a particular command to specify that, oh, this column I'm creating, the values I want to store inside this column are going to carry numeric data, right? So we use some particular keywords to specify that. So the first is int. Int stands for integer. So if you want to store whole numbers, you make use of int. If you want a column to carry just whole numbers, you make use of int. So next is floats, right? So floats is used for storing floating point numbers. I mean decimal numbers that don't have any sort of fixed points, right? So that's what you use your float for. You use to store floating numbers, decimals. Your float and decimal play similar roles, right? You use both your float and your decimal to store anything decimal, anything float. But it's just that with your decimal, your float numbers can be fixed, right? You can specify the digits, the length of digits you want before the point. You can specify the length of digits you want after the point, right? So that's it with your decimal, unlike your float. So while big int is used to store whole numbers that are very large, once your whole number is exceeding 9 digits, right? So it is large. It is best you store that particular column, store the column that is carrying that sort of data using big int. So just have it at the back of your mind that if you want to store numeric data, if you want a column to carry numeric data, for instance, now let's say we are creating a vessel table, right? And we have a column for our IMO number. So our IMO number is obviously going to carry numeric values, right? So depending on the kind of um, numeric value we want to store, we can make use of any of these numeric data types we have here, right? So the best option is going to be int because our IMO is not going to be very large, right? So we can make use of int. So next we have our string data types. So our string data types are used to store text or character data. So anything that has to do with alphabets, that has to do with special characters, we make use of our string data types to do that. And then from the options you have here, you see that the first one we have is varchar. So varchar stands for variable character, and my varchar comes with a bracket, right? So whenever I'm making use of varchar, I'm specifying that, oh, any value that is going to be entering this particular column, right, is going to be an alphabet, right? It's going to be an alphabet. And then inside that bracket, that n I'm putting is now specifying the maximum length of character I want to allow. Say, for instance, now I'm storing my vessel name, right? And I want to say, and I must always, and when I'm storing my vessel name, the best um data type to store that column as is going to be varchar, right? So when I'm storing it as varchar, I must always put a maximum length of character, right? I must always say that, oh, this is the number of character I want to allow. So I can say I want to allow up to 50 character. So which means that whatever name, whatever vessel name I'm storing, right, is not going to exceed the count of that 50. You get? So because I've specified the maximum length of character is going to be 50. So the next is my char. So my char is similar to my varchar, but there's a reason why most of the time varchar is mostly used and not char. So for my varchar now, if I say that, oh, I want the maximum length of character, right, for this particular column to be 50, and I store in a value that has just 5 characters, right? So it's my varchar is going to automatically fit in my cell to carry the number of words, the number of characters I've put in, regardless of the maximum length I specified. But with my char, I'm going to need to put in extra spaces to make up for the maximum length of character I've specified, which is why most of the time char is hardly used and then varchar is just used, right? So our text is now used to store a variable length with no specific limit. Like if you want to store like a full sentence, right? So you can make use of your text to do that. So that is it for string data types. So our numeric data types for storing numbers, our string for storing alphabets and special characters. And then next, very important, we have our dates and data sorry, our date and time data types. So our date and time data type is used for storing date and time. right? If you want a column to carry dates, right, it's very straightforward. We store that column as dates, and then it follows the format year, 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 y, MMDD. So year, month, day. So whenever we are storing dates in SQL, it must follow this specific format: year, month, and day. So if you want to store time, very straightforward also. Our keyword is time. So we store our time in the format hours, minutes, and seconds, right? So we can store our date and time values together, right? So to store your date and time values together, you make use of dates and time, right? So this is going to store both your date and your time together. And then lastly, we also have timestamp. So timestamp is going to store your date and time values with your zonal information, right? So now, the next thing we're going to talk about are our constraints in SQL. So we must understand constraints when it comes to understanding how data is stored, because constraints are like putting rules on each column in your table, right? Specifying what you want to allow and what you don't want to allow. So whenever you are putting in constraints, you are saying, oh, for this particular column, this is what I want to allow. For this particular column, this is not what I want to allow. You get? So now the first type of constraints we have is not null, right? So whenever we are making use of not null, we are saying we don't want any empty cell in that particular column. Say I create a vessel name Say I create a vessel name column now, and then I put in not null as a constraint. So I'm saying for my vessel name, I don't want any empty cell in that vessel name column, right? So that's what my not null does. My not null makes sure that there are values in every cell that is saved as not null. That's the not null constraints. So next is unique, right? So when I'm making use of unique, I'm saying that, oh, whatever value that is entering this column, whenever I use the constraint of unique to a particular column, I'm saying, sorry, please. I'm saying whatever value that is entering this column must be unique. It can't be duplicated. So that's it for my unique. So next is my primary key, right? So my primary key is a combination of not null and unique. So my primary key, it serves as the unique identifier for every record on my table, right? So whenever you are creating your table in SQL, right, every table must have something called a primary key. If I'm going to create a vessel table, right, so the IMO, right, is going to be the primary key, right, because each vessels are going to have a unique IMO number, right, so that IMO is going to serve as a primary key, right. So every table that you are creating must have a primary key, and then you can only have one primary key on a table. You can add the other constraints multiple times. You can add not null on two columns. You can add unique on two columns. But you see this your primary key. Only one column must carry primary key. And that primary key is going to serve as the unique identifier for every record on that table. So the next is a foreign key. So a foreign key is used to create your relationship between is used to create the relationship between the tables, right? When you have a primary key on one table, say I have my IMO, right? I have my IMO on my vessel table, and then I bring that IMO to, let's say, my port table, right? So what I've done is I've created the relationship between my vessel table and my port table. So I'm going to be able to track maybe the arrival date of the vessel, maybe the where the vessel is landing and all that stuff, because I've created a relationship between the two tables. So next is my check constraint. So my check constraint is checking that all the values in my column are meeting a specific condition, right? So for instance, now I can check that for my dates column now, all the dates that is going to be entering my dates column are within a specific range. You get? So my check is going to use to ensure that. Next is my default, right? So my default is basically saying if I decide to leave a cell in the column empty, right? What is the default value I want there? So that's what my default is all about. If I decide to leave a cell in a column empty, what is the default value I want there? So that's that. So next, we have a use case of our data types and constraints in SQL. So what's happening here now is I'm trying to create a table, right? So the name of this table is vessel. So the command for creating a table in SQL is very straightforward. Create table followed by the name you want your table to be. So I want the name of my table to be vessel, right? So that's why I have this vessel here. I say create table vessel, then I open a bracket and start specifying the columns I want on my vessel table alongside their data types and their constraints, right? So the first column on my vessel table is IMO number, right? You can see IMO underscore number, right? So that's the first column on my vessel table, right? So when I'm creating this IMO number, I must specify the kind of data I want to allow for IMO number. So for IMO number, it's going to be integer, right? Why is it integer? Because my IMO number are going to be numbers, right? They're going to be whole numbers. So that's why I'm making use of integer, right? And my IMO number is also going to serve as the unique identifier for every vessel that is recorded on that table. So it is also a primary key. So like I said before, every table must have a primary key. So when I'm creating a vessel table, it just makes sense that my my IMO number is the primary key, right? So whenever I'm creating my table, I must specify the kind of data I want the column to carry and then the constraints I want to add to that column, right? So the next is my vessel name. So my vessel name is going to carry text, it's going to carry character data, right? So I can store it as varchar. So remember that I said varchar is a string data type that you can use for storing text or character data, right? And you can see that my varchar has a bracket, and inside that bracket I have 50 there. So I'm saying the maximum length of vessel name, right? I want to store is not going to exceed 50, right? It's not going to exceed 50. And then you can see the constraint. You can see the constraint I've created, right? So I've used my constraint is not null. So when I'm saying not null, I'm saying I can't leave any cell in my vessel name empty. My primary key also has the future of not null and unique, right? So my primary key also has the future of not null and unique. So whenever I store a column as primary key, I'm saying it must be unique and it can't be null also, right? So next is my vessel type, right? So my vessel type is similar to my vessel name, right? Same constraints, not null. And then my flag state is carrying varchar, right? And it's 100. Unique is not a reasonable constraint, but I'm just showing you how my unique also works, right? You can put in unique just the same way you're going to put in your not null or whatsoever constraints you have, right? So before you can start creating your tables, right, in SQL, right? Remember that all of these tables are stored inside somewhere called a relational database, right? So before you can start creating your tables, the first thing you are going to do is you are going to create a database first, right? You are going to create a database first. So to create a database in SQL is very straightforward, right? To create a database, you use create database, right? Create database, followed by the name you want your database to be. So I want the name of my database to be Maritime DB. I'm saying create database Maritime DB. Then after I've done that, I'm going to highlight and execute the statement. So that way my database will be created. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put that database into use so that whatever table I'm creating, my vessel table, my port table, whatever table I'm creating is going to be falling into this database, right? So I'm going to have to put the database into use. I'm going to say use my database, and I'm going to execute the statement. So it is after I've created my database, that is when I can now go ahead with creating my table, right? So after creating my table, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in values into my table. right? I'm going to put in values into my table using the insert statement. So now I want us to get into it right now. I'm going to be opening my SQL and I'm going to be introducing you to the interface of SQL, right? So this is it here, right? So this is the interface of SQL. I hope you can see my screen. So when you, let me close this, you're not going to have this, right? So when you open your SQL, you're going to see something like this, database engine, right? So what you're meant to do at this point is, sorry, please, let me adjust this. So what you're meant to do at this point is you're meant to connect, right? You're meant to connect. So you have to make sure that this your server name is matching your username here. So this your server name must be matching your username. And then you must ensure that this trust server certificate is ticked, right? And then you click on connect. So you've connected to a database. So this left space here is something called an object explorer, right? It's called an object explorer. So this object explorer has this databases folder. So I'm really concerned with this databases folder because any database I create is going to be going into this databases folder, right? So look at all the list of databases I've created so far. And inside these databases, we have the tables that will be imputed into any one of them. So this button is also very important. This execute button is also very important. And then also is this new query here. So this new query is going to provide me with the interface for writing my SQL code, right? So when I click on this new query now, I have this interface now. So this interface is where I'm going to write my SQL code. So right now we have a task, right? So I'm going to share that task with you guys. I'm going to share the task. So see our task. We are to design a maritime fleet database named Fleet Registry. So we are to design a maritime fleet database named Fleet Registry. So the Fleet Registry database, we have two tables, vessel table and port calls, right? So those are the two tables. Those are the name of the two tables, the vessel table and port calls. So our vessel table will have the following columns: IMO number, vessel name, vessel type, and flag state. Then our port call are now going to have the following columns, right? Call ID, IMO number, port name. So this IMO number is coming from this vessel table, right? And we are bringing it into this vessel table so that we'll be able to create a relationship between our vessel table and our port calls. So the port name, the arrival date, then we have to insert values into each of the table and then retrieve the table, right? So let me go ahead to share. So now the first thing I'm to do right now is to create a database according to the question, right? I'm to create a database named Fleet Registry. So there's something called comments whenever you are writing code in any whatsoever the programming language is. You always make something called comments or notes before any line of code. So a comment is just like it's basically a note that is explaining what it is you are doing. You get, so I want to create a database now, right? So I want to make a note that is explaining that, oh, this command I'm going to be typing now is to create a database, right? So now I'm going to write the comments here now. So to write the comment, I'm going to have to bring in a double hyphen. So if I punch in a double hyphen, anything written after that double hyphen will not be recognized as a code or a command. Instead, it's going to be recognized as a comment, as a note. So I'm going to say create database for fleet registry, for fleet registry. So this is just like outlining my task, right? I want to create database for fleet registry. So I made a note. Then I'm going to press enter to come to the next line. Then I'm going to write I'm going to write the actual code for creating that database. So the command for creating the database is create database, right? So that's the command. You can see that it is in blue, right? Followed by the name I want my database to be, which is fleet underscore registry, right? So fleet underscore registry. So one thing I want you to notice is that whenever you are creating a database in SQL, your database name should not have space in between. Instead of space, you put in an underscore, or you write it like this, but don't leave space in between like this. This is wrong, right? So instead of the space, you put in an underscore, or you bring them together. You use camel case. You get. So, and then after you are done with a line of code, you put something called a semicolon. So synonymous to a full stop in English language. So whenever you are done with a particular line of command in SQL, you put in your semicolon. So semicolon is just saying we are done with this line of code. And one thing you should know also is that SQL is not case sensitive. You can see that this my create database is all in caps, but it does not really matter. If I write it in small letter, it does not change anything. So SQL is not case sensitive. So create database is the command, is the keyword, right? Why fleet registry is the name I want my database to be. So after I've done this, I'm now going to highlight this. I'm going to highlight this, right, and click this execute button. So I'm going to click on this execute button. So you can see that I have a message here that says command completed successfully, which means I've successfully created this database, fleet registry. Do you get that? So now, remember that I said I'm going to be concerned with this databases folder, because any database I create is going to be appearing under this folder. So just to be sure that I created this database, right? Just to be sure that I created this database, I'm going to open up this databases folder. I'll double click on it, right? And I'll come to check for my fleet registry here. Come to check for my fleet registry. So currently, I don't have anything called fleet registry here. Since I don't have that, since I can't find my database here, but I know that I've created it, I've written this command, I've highlighted and executed. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to click on refresh, right? So once I click on refresh and I check here, I should see my database now. I should see my fleet registry. This is the database now. So what we did now is one way to create a database, right? So this is one way to create a database. You can create your database using this command. So I've created the database now using this command here, create database followed by the name I want my database to be. So another method I can use is using this my databases folder here, right? I'm going to right click on this databases folder, and you see this new database here. I'll click it. So once I click it, this box is going to pop up, and all I have to do is just to type in the name I want my database to be, right? So let me call this fleet underscore registry. And I'm going to add two just to differentiate between what we've made, right? So fleet underscore registry, and then that's all I need to do. Then I'm going to click on OK, right? So I'm going to have my database immediately. So see the database here right now, fleet registry 2. That's the database I just created, right? So those are the two ways I can create my database. I can write out the command, or I can just right click on these databases here and create the database. You get? So now the next thing I want to do is I want to put this database into use. So whenever you create a database, right? Whenever you create a database, the first thing you always want to do, right, is to The next thing you always want to do is to put the database into use. You are putting the database into use so that whatever it is that you are doing is going to be falling into the database. If you are creating tables, it's going to be falling into that database. So there are two ways I can put my database into use. I can use the command. So let me use the command. So first of all, I'm going to make a comment that says put the database, put the database into use. Right. So if I want to put my database into use, I'm going to say use followed by the name of my database. The name of my database is fleet underscore registry. I'm going to say fleet underscore. Then you can see my database here. I can select it, registry. Right. Then I'll add my semicolon because I'm done with this command. So I want you to take note of this place now, this master. So take note of this. You see that this place is master. But the moment I highlight this and execute, right? So you see that it becomes fleet registry, which means this database now is now in use. So any table I'm doing, anything I'm doing is going to be falling into the database because it is in use now. So that is one way of putting my database into use using the command, right? If I don't want to use the command, I can come directly here. So this place is going to be master. It's going to be master, and I can come here and just choose my database. If I click on this arrow beside the name of my database, I'll be able to see a list of all the databases I have. I can see Fleet Registry 1, Fleet Registry 2. If I click it, right, my database will be put into use. You get, so anything I do is going to be falling into the database. So let me put this database into use, right? So now we've done the first thing, which is to design our database. But then we are not done. We have our database, but then our database is empty, right? So our database is meant to have two tables, right? Our vessel table and port calls. So we are going to start with our vessel table, right? So I'm going to make a comment that says vessel table, right? Vessel table, because I want to start creating my vessel table. Sorry. So the next thing I want to do is I want to specify the columns that this vessel table is going to carry. So I'm just going to add a column. This is just like a comment, right? This is just like a comment that is explaining what I'm doing. So my vessel table is going to have IMO number, vessel name, vessel type. So I'm just going to copy it and just paste it here, right? You can see that my colors, right? You can see that my colors are in green. My comments are in green, rather. That's because of this double hyphen. So my comments are going to be in green. Your comments are not in green, then that means you are doing something wrong. So to create my vessel table now, right? So to create my database, I said create database. To create my table now, I'm going to say create table, followed by the name I want my table to be. So I want the name of my table to be vessel. So I'm going to type in vessel. Vessel, right? So create table vessel, but then I'm not done yet. I now have to open a bracket, right? I'm opening a bracket because I want to start specifying the columns I want this table to carry, right? So the first column is going to be my IMO number. It's going to be my IMO number, right? So I'm going to press enter to come to the next line. Then I'm going to type in IMO underscore, right? Underscore what? Number. So remember, my database name, my table names, and my column names can't have space in between. Instead of space, I put in an underscore. You get? So that's what's happening now. My column name, which is IMO number, instead of putting space in between, I'm putting in an underscore. So IMO underscore number. So what kind of values am I going to store under my IMO number? It's going to be whole numbers, right? So I'll make use of INT, integer, right? And this IMO number is going to serve as the primary key for every record on my table. right? It's going to serve as the primary key for every record on my table, for every vessel record. So I'm going to call this a primary key, right? A primary key, right? So that's that. Then this is one column here. So I'm not done. I'm going to do comma because I want to go to the next column. So comma because I want to go to the next column. Then I'll come under and type in my vessel underscore name and my vessel underscore name. So which is my vessel name? So for my vessel name now, I want to store characters, right? I want to store alphabets rather. So I'm going to use varchar, right? I'll use varchar, and then I'm going to use 50 in brackets. So 50 just to say that whatever vessel I'm putting under my vessel name column is not going to exceed 50, right? So 50. Then a constraint I'll use is not null, which means I can't leave my vessel name empty, right? Then I'm going to do a comma, right? After doing the comma, I'm coming down to the next, right, which is my vessel type. So I'm going to come to the next line, type in my vessel underscore type in my vessel type. Sorry. Then I'm going to call this a varchar also. Varchar. Open my brackets. Let me put in, I can put in any figure I want. I can put in 30, right? So let me use the constraint of not null also, right? Not null, then comma. The next is my flag state, right? Flag state. So I'm going to type in flag underscore state, and I'm going to make use of varchar also.
Good evening.
Make,
Hello. Good evening. No need to wash up. No wash up.
good, eve-
I been go car wash.
good evening,
No mechanics. So I
good evening, Mr. Chiagozim. Please meet your. So I'm going to open a bracket here and flag state. Let me put in 50 also, right? Close the bracket and use not null, right? Then so all of these are the columns I'm going to have inside this my vessel. So I want you to look at it. You are creating your table vessel, opening this bracket, specifying all the columns you want inside the vessel table, alongside the data types you want to allow and the constraints. Then after you are done with that, you are going to close your bracket, right? You're going to close your bracket and then you add your semicolon because you are done. Then after you've done this, you're now going to highlight, right? So you're going to highlight this, everything from your create table vessel down to this last semicolon here. Then you execute, right? You execute. So now you see this command completed successfully, which means my first table vessel has been created, right? So which means my first table vessel has been created. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to check out this my vessel table, right? I want to check it out. I want to make sure that it is inside this my fleet registry database, right? Because this table is meant to be inside here, right? So I'm going to come to this my fleet registry database here. I'll come to my fleet registry database. I'm going to double click on it, right? This folder we open database diagrams tables. I'm concerned with this tables folder. So I'll double click on this tables folder, right? And then down below here, dbo.vessel is my table. So that means my table is inside this fleet registry. I'm not concerned with all these folders. They are the system folders, right? They came with the system. So this is the table I'm concerned with, the one I just created, dbo.vessel, right? So what I've done is I've successfully created my vessel table, right? So if I want to see the table I've created, right, I'm going to use something called a retrieval statement, which we are going to go into in our next class, right? I'm going to use something called a retrieval statement or a query language. So I'll make a comment that says retrieve the table, right? Retrieve the table. This is like to see the table I've created, right? I'm going to come to the next line and I'm going to do select, and I'm going to do asterisk, right? Then from, so what's the name of my table? The name of my table is vessel, and I'll say vessel, right? Add my semicolon, and I'm going to highlight this, highlight and execute, right? So this is what I've created. This is the structure of the table I've created. So I have my columns, my IMO number, my vessel name, my vessel type, and the flag state. You get? So everything I've done now, let me just go through everything again. I created a database, right? So after creating the database, I put the database into use, right? So that anything I do, right, is going to be falling into the database. So after putting the database into use, I had to create my table, right? The first table is vessel table. So I created the structure for the table, which I just did. I specified the column that is going to be inside the table, the data types each of these columns are going to carry, and then the constraints they are going to carry. So now, after doing that, I confirmed that this table I created is inside the database I want it to be, right? Our fleet registry database. So after confirming that, I now retrieve the table to see the table, right? So that's what I just did now. So now, the next thing we now want to do, right, is to now put in values into this table. As you can see now, the table is empty. It just has column headers, IMO number, vessel name, vessel type, and all that, right? So now the next thing we want to do is we want to put in values into this table. So to put in values into this table, I'm going to come to the next line and make a comment explaining that, oh, what I want to do is to put values into vessel table, right? So to put values into vessel table, I'm going to use a command called insert. I'm going to say insert into, followed by my table name. So the name of my table is vessel, right? I'm going to say insert into vessel, right? Values. So insert into vessel values. So I want to follow the structure I have for my table, right? So the first thing I have in my table is IMO number, right? And remember that my IMO number is stored as an integer and also a primary key, which means it must be unique, right? It must be unique, and then it must be a number. So I'm going to open a bracket, right? So these brackets are going to carry the records for each. The brackets are going to carry the records, right? So for my IMO, let me just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, right? So my IMO is meant to be 7 characters, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good. So this is my IMO number, right? So then the next is comma to get my vessel name, right? So my vessel name, I'm going to open a quote because my vessel name is stored as a voucher. All these columns stored as voucher, you are going to put their values into a quote. If it is stored as number, you don't need to put it in a quote. But if your column is stored as voucher, as date, as anything else that is not number, right? Their values are going to be stored into a quote. So vessel name, let me just say MV Horizon, right? Then comma. The next is going to be my vessel type, right? So let me say this vessel is a container ship. I'm going to open a code, type in container ship, comma, close the quote, then comma. The next is going to be my flag state, right? Let me say the flag is from Nigeria, right? So let me just put in Nigeria, then close the bracket. So this is one record now, right? So this is one record now. So I'm going to do comma, right? Come to the next line, right? Now I'm going to open my bracket again. open my bracket. Then let me type in another IMO number. Let me use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me use 9, comma. Let me use MT Voyage Voyager Voyager, comma. Let me open my quote again. Let me call this an oil tanker. Oil tanker, comma. Let me see Liberia. So if you miss a quote, you miss a comma, you miss something, you are going to run into an error. You are going to run into an error. You must not miss any of all those quotes, all those comma. All your values should be in quotes. If it is not stored as number, then if it's not stored as a numeric column as integer, then it should be in quotes. Right? It is only when it is stored as, so we are just going to create, let's say 5. To create 5, 7, 0. Just giving random names, right? Just a more data set. We dragon. And next, we use, let's call this bulk carrier. Bulk carrier. And let's call this, let's say from Panama. Panama, close. Let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 1, comma. Let's see. Asking call this a general cargo. General cargo. Then comma. So next, let's see it's coming from data. Let's do one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 2. Trade wind. NV. Trade wind. So let's call this an NNG carrier. And it's coming from USA. Let's change. Let's switch this. Let's see this is an LNG carrier. LNG carrier. And this is general cargo. So now what I've done is I can now close my bracket, add my semicolon. So this is the command, insert into my vessel values. Then my IMO number, this is one IMO number, my vessel name, my vessel type, and the flag state. Right. So if I highlight this, highlight all this, do my insert and execute. 5 rows affected, which means I've created 5 rows, right? So I'm going to highlight this, and execute. So this is what I've created here. So you can see the IMO number, the vessel name, the vessel type, and the flag state. Do we get? So before we go on now, I want to take questions. So any questions before we move further.
Yes, I have a
So,
question.
and okay,
My question is if you want to add dates, like a
yes,
particular day like today's date,
yes.
what do you use it integer or
So you make use of dates. If you want to add dates, you make use of dates. Any other question? And we are going to add. We are going to. We are still going to add dates, right, for our second table. So we're going to see that.
She's asking if it's integer or what do you use. I don't know if her question. Bolanle, do you feel your question was responded to?
Yes, yes.
Bolanle, can you hear me?
yes, but it's
So
best I
if you are
see it myself. Yes, I can hear you. Don't worry, when he does it, it's
Okay.
best he does it. So
Okay. Hmm.
yes, so let's go to our next uh let's go to our next table, which is our port score, right? So I'm going to come to the next line. I'm going to call this port score, right? So for my port score, the columns I'm going to have there, let me check. So I'm going to have call ID, IMO number, arrival date. Let me paste this. Okay. So call ID, IMO number, port name, and my arrival date. So I'm going to come to the next line, right? So to create my port call table, I'm going to say create table, and I'm going to call this my table port underscore call. So remember, my table cannot have space in between. My table name cannot have space in between, right? So first is going to be my call ID, call underscore ID. So my call ID is going to be my primary key, right? So I'm going to call this, let me use a voucher for this because I want this my call ID to be a mixture of numbers and letters. So that's why I'm making use of voucher. So let me use 10 because it's not going to exceed 10, right? And I'm going to call it a primary key, comma. The next column is going to be my port name, port underscore name. So I'm going to call this voucher also, voucher, then open my brackets, and then let me call this 20, and I can use not no, comma. Then the next is going to be my arrival date. So I'm going to say arrival underscore date. For my arrival date now, I'm going to make use of dates, right? So I'm just going to make use of dates. So that's that. I can add not null as my constraint, right? So I'm going to close my brackets, add my semicolon, then highlight this and execute, right? So I have my port call table, right? So let me refresh this my fleet registry database so that port call table can reflect here. So if I right click on this and I click refresh, if I open up my tables folder, so this is my port call table. So let me retrieve the table, retrieve port call. So to retrieve it, I'm going to do select asterisk from the name of my table, which is port underscore call. Then I light and execute. So this is my table now. I missed something. I missed my IMO number. I missed my IMO number. So I'm going to have to delete this. Let me delete this table. Click OK. So I'm going to type in my IMO number after my. So my IMO number is going to be a foreign key. That's the constraint I'm going to use. IMO number integer. Then it's going to be a foreign key because I'm bringing it from this table, right? I'm bringing it from my vessel table. And then on my vessel table, it is a primary key, right? But then because I want a relationship between this my port call table and my vessel table, that's why I'm bringing in this IMO number here, right? So I'm going to open a bracket, right, and say IMO underscore number, right, is a foreign key. So I'm now going to say references. So which table am I referencing it from? I'm referencing it from my vessel table. So I'm going to type in vessel, right? Then I'm going to open my bracket and type in my IMO underscore number. For having my comma, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm bringing in this my IMO number from this my vessel table into my port table, right? So I'm going to know which um which vessel is calling, right? So when I'm bringing my IMO number from his own table, right, into this table, so it is a primary key on this table, right? So but when I'm bringing it to this port call, it becomes a foreign key, right? So this primary key and foreign key is what we use to create a relationship between the tables. So I must specify that my IMO number is a foreign key, right? And then in brackets, I'm going to specify the column I'm using to create that um, relationship, which is IMO number. Then I have to specify the table I'm referencing it from. Where am I referencing it from? Referencing vessel. So what's the column on the table I'm referencing? It is still my IMO number, right? Then comma the next column. Then I'm going to highlight this, and then execute. So let me come back here and refresh my fleet registry. Right click and refresh. Come to my tables here. So this is my ports call table, right? So now let me retrieve the table. Retrieve the ports call table. I'm going to say select asterisk from my ports underscore call. Now I'm going to highlight and execute. So this is my table now, right? So now all I have to do is to start putting in the values into this table, right? So I'm going to come to the next line and say put values into port table, into port. Let me just say port table. I'm going to say insert into. So what's the name of my table? The name of my table is port score. I'm going to say port underscore call values, right? Come to the next line, open a bracket, and make sure that whatever I'm putting is following the structure. So for my call ID now is voucher, so I'm going to open up a quote. Let me put in port call 123, then comma the IMO number. So the IMO number must be the same IMO numbers I have here, right? So that I'm going to know, okay, which vessel is calling, right? So the first one I have is, let me start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's the first one I have here. Okay, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. 8. Then comma. Next is going to be my port name, right? So let me use uh let me use ported down. My arrival date. So my date is also going to be in quotes, right? So let me use 2025. So remember that my date follows a particular format, which is year, month, and day. Year, month, and day. So I put in my year, my month. Let me put in the day. Right. So I'm going to close my bracket, comma, come to the next line, do the same thing. See. Let me use sorry. So next is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Right. You guys should you guys should uh help me out with port names. Let me use Lagos.
I'll help you out with what?
Port
Lucky
names,
deep
port
seaport.
names.
Lucky deep seaport.
Upper port on airport.
Port on airport, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 3, 4. A copy of this. See. Okay. So let's leave this at 3. Lucky deep seaport. Let's call this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 0, 5, 7. Let's call this PC 125. Let's see, 26. Call this 11. So let's just leave this at 3. So I'm going to add my semicolon. I'm going to highlight this and execute. So we've created 3 rows, we've created 3 records. So if I highlight this, my retrieve, and I'm going to execute. So yes, I also have my port call table. So I can see the 2 tables together. Right, let me say retrieve the tables. Retrieve the tables. Right, so I'm going to do select asterisk from vessel, and below I also have select asterisk from port call. Right, so I can just highlight this and execute. So this is my vessel table and this is my port table. So this is how we create a database and create tables, put tables into this database in SQL, right? So we created our database using our create, we put it into use, created our vessel, we retrieved our vessel table, put values into our vessel table, then we created our port table also, we retrieve it, and then we put values into our port table. And now we have a port table. So now we have something called basic SQL queries in we have something called basic SQL queries. Sorry, please give me a minute. Let me open my slide. So we have something called basic SQL queries, right? What we've done now basically is I've shown you how a data, right, is stored in our database, right? So we want to quickly touch these basic SQL queries till is 8:30, right? So I'm just going to talk about it, and then in our next class we are going to go into the practical. So basically, basic SQL queries is now those queries that we used to is like making a request to our database to retrieve or manipulate our data. So now we understand how this data is stored in a database, right? So now, how do we now work with this data? What are the keywords we use to work with this data? So the process of extracting your data, of retrieving your data, is called querying. You are querying that database. So the first type of SQL query language we have is select, right? So what select does is select is used to retrieve data from one or more tables. So like the database I created now, we created about 2 different tables inside that database, right? And then if you want to see the table, if you want to retrieve the table or the data in that table, we are going to use something called select. So select is just like telling the RDPMS, just like telling the database, give me, right? So our select does not work alone. Our select works together with from. So from is now used to specify where you want to get the data from, right? We have 2 different tables in our database. We have our vessel table and we have our port call table. So form is now used to specify, okay, from which one of these tables do we want to get the data? Do I want to get the data from our port call table, or I want to get the data from our vessel table? So our form is used to specify that. And this asterisk, right? The asterisk you are saying means all. So whenever you are making use of asterisk, you are saying you want to see all the columns inside that table, right? So instead of seeing all the columns, you can as well choose to just filter out the particular columns you want to see. So let me share my SQL. Share. let me see, basic SQL queries. Basic SQL queries. Say I want to return the vessel name and flag state from the table. So my vessel name and my flag state is on which table, right? Is on my vessel table, right? So if I do select, right, asterisk from vessel, so this is going to give me all the records on my vessel table. But then, based off this question, I don't want all the records, right? I just want the vessel name and the flag state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this asterisk, right, and specify the columns I vessel name and my flag state. So I'm going to erase this, right? And I'm going to type in my vessel name, right? Select my vessel name, comma, my flag state, my flag state. So if I highlight and execute this now, highlight and execute, it's going to give me just the vessel name and the flag state. You get? So that's basically how my select and form works. So I can decide to select specific columns, right? Instead of selecting all the columns for my table. So all I have to do is I just have to type in the column names. Instead of that asterisk, right? I take out the asterisk, type in the column names the same way it is on my table, right? And then type it in the column names I want them for my table, right? So that's basically how my select and form works. So very quickly, the next is where, right? So what my where is used to do is my where is used to filter my table. Let me see, filter the table, filter out vessel records, vessel records whose flag state is in Nigeria. So my where is used to filter out my table. So look at this table now. Look at my vessel table. Let me do select asterisk from vessel. Right. So this is my table. And I just want to see the record for Nigeria, right? I want to see the IMO number, the vessel name, the vessel type, the flag state, just for Nigeria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my where to make that happen. But I'm going to say select asterisk from vessel. But just select asterisk from vessel will give me the whole vessel record. But I don't want the whole vessel record. I want just for Nigeria. So I'm not going to say where, right? So where what? I'm not going to say where this flag states because the condition attached to this question now is tied to this my flag states column, right? So I'm not going to say where my flag states flag underscore states equals to, and I'm going to open a quote, then I'm going to type in Nigeria. I'm putting my Nigeria in a quote because remember that when I was creating it, when I was creating my table, I put this voucher in a quote. So the same thing applies when I want to filter out a particular value for my column, right? It must be in a quote. You get so select as select asterisk from vessel name where the flag state equals Nigeria. So if I highlight this, highlight and execute. So it's giving me just the record, right, for my vessel that's in Nigeria, right? Say I want to filter out, let's say I want to filter out or let me say, get the record, right, for the vessel whose IMO number is, let's say, 12345 7, right? Is 12345 7. So I'm going to say select, right, asterisk from what's the name of my table? Vessel. I'm now going to say where. So my condition in this case is attached to this my IMO number, right? So I'm now going to say where my IMO underscore number is equals to, and I'm going to type in this number 12345 7, type in my IMO number. So but then what is now happening here is that because this is an integer, when I was creating the table, I didn't put it in a quote, right? So I don't need to put it in a quote this time around. And I'm going to highlight this, right, and execute. I don't have, okay, I think I missed the number. I missed 6. Let's check 6. Highlight this and execute. Don't I have this? I have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, I have 1 2 3 4 5 6 9. 1 2 3 4 5 6 9. So let me see IMO number. So if I highlight this, highlight and execute. Right. So this is the record here. Right. So that is basically how my year works. So next we have our so next we have our distinct. So what this distinct does is our distinct returns unique values making up a particular column. So but then I don't think we have any duplicate column. We don't have any duplicate column. So but maybe in our next class I'm going to show us how this distinct work. But we are going to go on to the next, which is order by. So order by is used to sort our data, right? So we can sort our data either in an ascending order or a descending order. So when we want to sort our data, we sort it using a particular column in that table, right? So we can sort our data using a particular column in that table. And then what we make use of is our order by to do that. So there are two ways we can sort our data, right? Either in an ascending order or a descending order. So when we are sorting in a descending order, we use this DESC, right? When we are sorting in an ascending order, we use ASC. So let me show us how that works. So I'm going to call this order by, right? Order by, I'm going to say sort the vessel name, sort the vessel table in an alphabetical order using the vessel name. So, if you are sorting in an alphabetical order, that's going to be ascending, right? Ascending is A to Z, right? If it's number 1 to 100, lowest to this smallest, right? But then if it is descending is going to be from Z to A, from the largest to the smallest, A to Z. But then in this case, we want to sort the vessel the vessel table in an alphabetical order using the vessel name. So we just want to order it using the vessel name. So we are going to say select asterisk from vessel, right? Then we're now going to say order by, order by. So based on our question, we are to sort this table now using our vessel name column. So we are going to order by our vessel name in an ascending order. So we are using ASC because we are sorting in an ascending order from like A to Z. So now let's highlight this, highlight and execute. As you can see now, it has rearranged the table, right? So it started from this MTG, right? Because of this gas here, MT comes before MTG comes before MTV, right? And MTV comes before MVH. So we sorted this table now using this vessel name in an alphabetical order. So we can also decide to sort this table using the IMO number, right? Let's say you want to sort the vessel name, the vessel table from the highest IMO number to the lowest, right? So that means we are going to make use of descending in this case, right? To say select asterisk from our vessel. Then we're now going to order by. So what are we ordering by? We are going to order by our IMO number, IMO number in a descending order. You get? Then I'm going to highlight this and execute. Execute. So now it has sorted my table for me based off the IMO number. So you can see the highest IMO number here: 1 2 3 4 7 2 7 1 7 0 6 9 6 8. So it just sorted the table for me based off the IMO number, right? So our order by is used for that, for sorting our table, for rearranging our table. Okay, Morenikemi,
Okay, good
what's
evening.
your
Okay, so I just have
good
a
evening?
simple question. So if let's
Okay,
assume my company has about let's say 50 vessels that we are currently managing, and
okay,
those vessels are like they have lot and lot of information from the let's say from
okay,
the crewing information down to fuel consumption, oil consumptions, and the like. Do I need to like
okay.
let's say per vessel create different databases for them, or I just have to do it the way you've done it, like this? Maybe doing crew listing separately on another table, then do all of other things. Let's say maintenance, like okay, this is the time they are going to do maintenance, or this is the maintenance routine. Do I have to just do it like table by table for those informations?
Yes, table by table. You store like maybe informations on your vessel, the fuel consumption, all that on one table, and then you store like the maintenance information too on another table. But on that maintenance table, right, the IMO number of your vessel, right, is going to be serving as was creating the relationship between the tables. Do you get my explanation? So that you know
Yes.
which vessel you are scheduling for
Okay.
maintenance on which particular day. You get?
Okay, so that means that I'm going to have like a master table, right? I'm going to have like a master table.
Yes,
Then
yes,
all other tables, it
yes,
just
exactly.
I'll just be creating relationship between them if I'm to let's say call out
Yes,
anything I want. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Morenike.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, sir. So that was a very good question. So, your IMO number will be the relationship between everything that you need to do. So if you have, for example, you are doing your maintenance, or you want to do crane, or you want to do chartering, or any other thing you want to do. So IMO number will be the relationship between all of them. That will be the relationship that will like be the ink that'll be the gap in between all of them. You understand? So yeah, definitely you have a master table.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Declare, go ahead, please.
Please, is anyone speaking? Peculiar is speaking. Can't hear.
Hello, Peculiar.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Were you speaking before?
Yes, I was speaking.
Oh, okay. You were not visible. Yeah, you were not audible. So just speak on now, please.
If Peculiar is speaking, he should be aware that no one is hearing him more. I don't know if it's my network, but I don't know if other people are hearing him. Engineer Dami, can you hear him?
No, I can't. He just spoke now, but I didn't hear him after then. Hello, Peculiar.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, but we're not hearing anything you've
I've
been
not been
saying.
talking.
Okay. So now the next thing is our top. So our top is used to limit the number of votes to be retrieved. So that's what we use our top for. So say we have like hundreds or thousands of rows, and then we want to see like maybe the first three rows making up those hundreds of thousands of rows, right? We make use of our top to do that, right? So I'm going to show you how our top works. And I'm going to type my top here. Let's say I want to get the first three records for the vessel table. Right, so I want to get the first three records. I'm going to do select top three asterisk from my table, from vessel, add my semicolon, then highlight this and execute. So you can see that it's limiting the records for me to just the first three, right? So same thing if I want the first two, all I have to do is just return this top three to top two. Yet, so that's going to do it for me. So now that's it for tonight's SQL. So if you have any questions, let's ask. If you have any questions, let's feel free to ask. So just a quick recap of everything that we've done, right? So I introduced us to what a relational database is, and then I introduced us to the interface of SQL, right? And then we spoke about creating a database, right? How to create a database, and then we created a database, right? So after creating our database, we put our database into use so that whatever thing that we are doing, right, whatever table we are creating is going to be calling into the database, right? And after that, I showed you the command for retrieving the table, which is a select asterisk for your table name. And then after that, we put in values into our table, right? So after putting values into our table, then we created our second table, which is our port score. So we created our port score table. We specified the column type, the column, the data types, the constraints that are going to be on the table. And then also we put in values into our port score table. And then after doing that, we retrieved our table, and then we went into basic SQL queries, right? So in basic SQL queries, we saw how we can retrieve our table, how we can filter out our table. If we want to see specific columns and not just all the columns from our table, we saw the way we can go about that. If we want to filter out our records, right, based on the condition, we saw the way we can achieve that using our where, right? And then also, if we want to sort our table based on the column, if you want to sort it, if you want to order it, maybe from the highest to the lowest, from the lowest to the highest in an alphabetical order, we saw the way we can achieve that using our order by, right? And then we also saw the way we can limit our records, right? The records to be retrieved using top, right? So any questions so far? So if there are questions, please ask. Into aggregate functions. We'll be, we'll be going into aggregate functions. So we are going to be making use of these aggregate functions to do actual analysis. And I'm also going to show you how you can import an external data, right? Say you have a data in CSV, you have a data in Excel, and then you want to bring it into a database, right? I'm going to show you how you can also achieve that. So that'll be it.
Thank you very much, Peculiar. Thank you, everyone. Probably when they work on the SQL, they may be able to come up with questions. We are still having a class tomorrow, but SQL is going to be taken for only 1 week because we don't have much to do on SQL. We'll be moving whatever we have learned in SQL and Excel to building the dashboard. Firstly, I would like to say thank you very much, Peculiar, and also acknowledge the work that everyone have done so far. Well, SQL is not just another tool, like maybe saying you are just learning another tool. It's a shift on its own, and a shift from relying on reports to creating your own answers to questions. Like as we are maritime professionals, many of us, we are used to making critical decisions, whether in the engine room or on deck or in port operations. But most times, those decisions are based on experience and limited visibility. What SQL has given you now, right now, is access, like ability to have access and access to what is really happening behind vessel performance, the fuel usage, delays at ports, or incidents or operations itself. So I'll say you're no longer just working in the system. Now you can now interrogate the system itself. But the truth is that data alone is not enough. Like just having your data alone is not enough. The real value comes when you can take that data and turn it into something people can understand, act on, and make decisions from. When you have your dashboards being built, you have the insights. And that's where we are heading to next by next week. So we are moving from extracting data to telling the story of the data itself. So from working behind the scenes to influencing decisions at the top, to creating insights, to creating solutions to problems that we might have. And that's when we will talk about Power BI, which will help us a lot, like creating story, And now from then you'll be talking about storytelling, we'll be talking about executive summary, because that's where the main teaching is. Like that's when we have to see the solutions to everything that we've been talking about, the Excel and the SQL. So don't just think like operators, start thinking like analysts, start thinking like decision makers, a solution solver. Because in today's maritime, as we have, the difference is very clear. It's not who has the most data, it's who understands it and uses the data and can explain the insights. And that's exactly who you are becoming. So I appreciate everyone, but most importantly, please let's practice everything that has been taught. Excel, cleaning your data, querying querying your languages, querying your data, and most importantly, building it into dashboard. So I appreciate everyone that attended to this class, and I'll
Please,
see you tomorrow.
sorry, please, I have this one question, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
It's just a short question. Sorry. Yeah. And just a quick, maybe like one or two sentence. What's what is the difference between SQL and Excel? Because basically, apart from handling large files, I mean, what can SQL do better? Where vis-a-vis using Excel. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, if you talk about Excel, like Microsoft Excel, any type of Excel, is a spreadsheet tool and is used to store. You can use it to calculate, and you can also use it to visualize your data manually, just like Peculiar did the previous class. But for SQL, it's a structured query language, and is a language used to communicate with databases. You use it to query, use it to filter your data, and you also use it to manage large data automatically. Do you understand? So, like if you have your SQL now, if you go to the top of your Excel, you see where they write SQL. So SQL, you can use it to communicate with database. Even in Power BI too, you can still like bring down your SQL into Power BI. So SQL is a language that is used to communicate with databases. Do you understand? Like, I don't know if I was able to break that down for you.
Sorry, I get the part. It's just that I'm kind of there's I at a point in time I was saying basically no difference between SQL and Excel
So
because
Excel,
that's what I'm
Excel,
asking.
like if you are working with large data, let's say millions of data, Excel will slow down with large data sets. But for SQL, it can handle millions of records. Let's say port operations that you already have millions of data. Your AIS, if you go to AIS data, you see that it's a whole lot. Excel will slow that down. So, but if you do that on SQL, you can be able to use it to communicate with your database.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, for example, again, like on Excel, you manually calculate averages and trends. But if you're on SQL, you can instantly get highest fuel consumers. You can get like the delays you have at ports, maintenance patterns. So you query a database of all vessels across fleets on SQL. But on Excel, like is I would say it's limited because once it starts getting to some certain level, certain numbers of data, it will start slowing down, it starts hanging, it will start it will not give you a fast response. But Excel, when it comes to Excel, it's very flexible, but SQL is more structured. And it's easy to learn Excel, but like SQL, like maybe requires a syntax, it requires for you to understand like those columns and all that, you understand? But it actually gives more accurate and repeatable results than Excel.
All right.
So if
Thank you.
you think about Excel is like engine room logbook. I don't know if you know the logbook in the engine room. So you use
Yeah,
it to
definitely.
record, adjust, and you use it to analyze manually. But when we talk about SQL, it controls the system dashboard itself. You can ask, show me all abnormal readings, and it will respond instantly. Whereas Excel, you have to analyze that manually. So in just one
In
statement,
some
in
ways,
just
like
one
saying
statement,
that Excel is more like manual, why SQL is digital.
I'll say Excel helps you work with data, but SQL helps you control. It helps you control and extract value for data at large scales. So when you're working with a very small data, I'll say go with Excel. But when we are talking about AI's data, we are talking about port operations, a very large data, just go with SQL. Do you get the point? Because Excel is easier to analyze, to work with, but SQL is more of syntax. So that's just it.
All right, I got that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions before we move on? Okay, Mr. Toby, do you have anything more to say? Hello, Mr. Toby. Okay, I think he's not more in this class. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, I might call it a night or a morning. I don't know where everyone is right now. So thank you very much and see you tomorrow so I can round up our SQL class before we'll be moving to building dashboard next week. Thank you.